think many millions of Australians would feel betrayed by our national broadcaster right now, and I think that the ABC does have to have a long, hard look at itself and to answer a question which I've posed before. Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on here?
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And what a difference a week makes. After praising the ABC to the skies for the killing season, the Prime Minister was back in attack mode last week and clearly much more comfortable, suggesting that Q&A was a lefty lynch mob and Auntie was giving comfort to terrorists.
What our national broadcaster has done is give a platform to a convicted criminal and terrorist sympathiser. Fair enough. We all believe in free speech, but in the end we have to make judgments. And I think that the ABC made a very, very serious misjudgment last night. Thank you so much.
That salvo from the PM was accompanied by a barrage of condemnation from all the usual suspects, led by the shock jocks at Sydney's Radio 2GB, who all lined up for a kicking.
I'm going to condemn the ABC today.
I think ABC's been heading for this point for a long time.
When are heads going to start rolling? And whose heads will they be?
A similar broadside came from the ABC's tireless critics at News Corp, whose big city tabloids in Brisbane, Adelaide, Melbourne and Sydney all screamed in unison that the ABC were terrorists or on the terrorist side.
It's your ABC, Traitor TV, ABC of Jihad. Whose side are you on?
News Corp's The Australian also gave the row front-page treatment and accused the ABC of arranging an ambush. And Rupert Murdoch's army of columnists and editorial writers, by and large, fell in behind to complete the attack.
Colluding with the enemy.
Malla fires hate bullets.
Doing the devil's work.
Q&A. Zaki Malla's aim would have been clear to ABC.
So, what was the cause of all this outrage? Well, it was the appearance on Q&A of a convicted criminal and hothead Muslim thug called Zaki Malla, whom the ABC allowed into a studio debate last Monday about the new anti-terror laws to ask this question.
As the first man in Australia to be charged with terrorism under the harsh Liberal Howard government in 2003, I was subject to solitary confinement, a 22-hour lockdown, dressed in most times in an orange overall and treated like a convicted terrorist while under the presumption of innocence. I had done and said some stupid things, including threatening to kidnap and kill. But in 2005, I was acquitted of those terrorism charges. Question to the panel: what would have happened if my case had been decided by the minister himself and not the courts?
That, if you like, was the ABC's crime number one. But the real hue and cry was almost certainly caused by the exchanges that followed. The first of which began with Steve Chobo, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, telling Malla that he would gladly strip him of his citizenship if he could.
But I'm happy to look you straight in the eye and say that I'd be pleased to be part of a government that would say that you're out of the country as far as I'm concerned.
Rubbish.
I'm telling you, I would sleep very soundly at night with that point of view.
As an Australian, I would be happy to see you out of this country.
But it was the next exchange that was third and worst. As the debate on the new terror laws wound up, Q&A's host, Tony Jones, invited Malla, who went to Syria in 2012 to support the Free Syrian Army, to sum up what he'd heard about the government's plans.
If you're quick about it.
Yeah, sure. The Liberals now have just justified to many Australian Muslims in the community tonight to leave and go to Syria and join ISIS because of ministers like him.
Despite that comment being instantly slapped down by Tony Jones, the Minister for Communications, Malcolm Turnbull, quickly got on the blower to the ABC's Managing Director, Mark Scott, and to Chairman Jim Spielman, and to Tony Jones to express his displeasure. And by 9 a.m. on Tuesday, the ABC had run up the white flag by announcing that Q&A would be subject to an external review to seek out bias, and by admitting
the Q&A program made an error in judgment in allowing Zaki Malla to join the audience and ask a question.
Having apologised so promptly, the ABC was soon being attacked from the other flank. First by former Media Watch producer David Salter, who was worried about
the speed of the ABC's apology. I mean, the show went off air at about 10:35,
And Finlayson, the head of the director of ABC Television, had distributed to the media a written statement and an apology before 9 o'clock the next morning. So there were some pretty heavy forces at work behind the scenes there.
And next, by the ABC's former head of news and current affairs, Peter Manning, who wrote in Crikey that Auntie's bosses needed to toughen up.
I think senior ABC management needs to get their act together to defend freedom of speech and the Q&A program and not buckle at the first whimper from the federal government.
So, what was it that the ABC felt it could not defend? It was that Malleh had been allowed to come on live rather than record his question. So, what he said, or perhaps did, could not be controlled. And given his background, we agree that was a mistake. But we also believe that in a programme about terror, it was reasonable to have him on. And in calmer times, most in the Australian media have shared that view. Malleh's made at least 24 appearances on radio and TV in the last 3 years, with 6 on the ABC, 6 on SBS, 3 on Channel 7, 4 on Channel 10, 2 on 2GB, which so roundly condemned Q&A, 2 on 3AW, and 1 each on 2UE and Perth's 6PR. Malleh has also featured in News Corp's papers, including an exclusive in The Australian in September 2012, which showed him in Syria holding an AK-47, but judged him to be reformed.
Rebel urges Muslims to wage a jihad of peace. At 29, Mr Malleh says he is a different man from the 20-year-old who made a jihad-style video after being refused a passport to travel to Lebanon.
According to that Australian story, Malleh was by 2012 anti-violence, pro-freedom and a devout supporter of Australian democracy. Yet the Australian has been helping to lead the charge against Q&A. More recently, Malleh has condemned the Sydney siege in this posting on YouTube.
This attack is no doubt an act of horror, it's an act of terror, and it's not justified by any stretch of the imagination.
And 2 months earlier, on Channel 10's The Project, Malleh was condemning Islamic State as idiots and wankers and warning Australian teenagers not to go to the Middle East to fight for them.
And for those who are considering to join ISIS, I hope Asia is onto you, I hope your passport is refused, and I hope you are arrested and locked up until you wake up to yourself and realise the harm that you're doing to the community and Greater Australia.
But let's also be clear, Malleh is no clean skin. He was convicted in 2005 of threatening to kill ASIO officers. And by his own admission, he is a sympathiser of Jabhat al-Nusra, a Syrian terrorist group linked to Al-Qaeda.
Why is Jabhat al-Nusra a terrorist organisation? They're not a terrorist organisation. They are in Syria to help the revolutionists.
And fighting for the people.
Against a dictator.
The ABC told us that Q&A were not aware of that YouTube video, nor did they know that Malleh has expressed repulsive views about women. In 2006, Malleh spoke up for the infamous Scaf brothers after they were convicted of rape because they, quote, hadn't killed their victims as US soldiers in Iraq had done. And in January this year, he tweeted that 2 News Corp columnists were, quote, whores who needed to be gangbanged, which some defenders of the ABC believe should have ruled him out.
Malleh should have been a no-go zone after he tweeted threats of sexual violence against columnists Miranda Devine and Rita Panahi a few months past.
Had Q&A been holding a debate about rape, we would agree with that view. But it was not. It was about terror and stripping people like Malleh of their citizenship. Sure, it could have been done better. And here's how. 5 years ago, another terrorist sympathiser and convicted criminal was given a platform by Q&A to confront a much more famous Liberal politician.
Hi, I'm David Hicks. When you were Prime Minister, you left me in Guantanamo Bay for 5.5 years. During that time, I was detained without charge for a long time. I was denied a fair trial. I was tortured. Do you believe that I was treated humanely and that the military commission was a fair system? Thank you.
That question was recorded so that what Hicks said could be controlled. But another difference was in the comeback from John Howard, who made an eloquent pitch for Australian values.
Well, I made a couple of responses to David Hicks. The first is that isn't it a great country that allows this kind of exchange to occur? And this is not the sort of exchange that would occur in other countries and in dictatorships, and it ought to make all of us whatever our views are about my government's policies concerning Mr Hicks ought to make all of us very proud that we live in a country that allows that sort of exchange.
5 years later, the Prime Minister has seized on Q&A's error to restart a campaign about the ABC being out of control. And he's told his party room that Q&A is a lefty lynch mob. But if anyone's acting like a lynch mob, it's certain sections of the government and News Corp, whose tabloids on Thursday came back baying for blood again.
ABC. Arrogant, brazen, contempt.
Once again, News Corp's big-name columnists also joined the hunt, with Andrew Bolt leading the pack.
Time to act on ABC lynch mob. A furious Prime Minister Tony Abbott this week challenged the ABC. Whose side are you on? And I challenge Abbott. We've known for years what side it's on. Now, what will you do about it?
Within hours, the Prime Minister had responded to that question. Seizing upon the fact that Q&A had been repeated on Wednesday morning in its entirety and not taken down from the ABC's website, Mr Abbott told a press conference on Thursday that he found the decision utterly incomprehensible.
Frankly, heads should roll over this. Heads should roll over this.
And over at News Corp, they'd already decided whose head that should be, with the Australian's Bill Leak producing this appallingly tasteless cartoon.
I'll take that as a comment.
In his column, Andrew Bolt had claimed that the ABC now posed a threat to democracy. But one could argue that the real threat would come from shutting down debate. And after days of silence, the ABC's managing director, Mark Scott, stood up in Melbourne last Thursday to make that point.
The ABC is clearly Australian. It's on the side of Australia. The A in ABC is for Australian. And the part we play, what we do for the side, is a vital one, central to our culture and our democracy, that of being an independent public broadcaster. A state broadcaster is the communications arm of the government. Its role is to communicate the messages of the government, and certainly not to do anything that would undermine any government message. Surely, no one seriously wants the ABC to be a state broadcaster.
But the ABC's plea for independence and open debate fell on deaf ears. Next morning on Channel 9's Today, Christopher Pyne was protesting.
Mark Scott is trying to change the debate to something that it isn't. He's trying to pretend that the government is trying to close free speech at the ABC.
And Malcolm Turnbull, who's been highlighting the physical dangers of allowing a hot-headed terrorist sympathiser into a TV studio, was only a little more conciliatory.
Mark Scott is entitled to assert the independence of the ABC. He's entitled to stand up for free speech, and I think we should all speak up for free speech regularly. But I think that what he perhaps could have spent some more time on in his speech was actually reflecting on what was clearly this is not something to just brush off as an error of judgment.
Well, the critics at News Corp certainly won't let that happen anyway. There was another barrage over the weekend, and this morning condemning the ABC. And even before Scott had finished talking, columnist Miranda Devine was telling Sky's Paul Murray,
I think that what the government should be doing is none of this ranting, empty talk from Malcolm Turnbull and even the Prime Minister about heads should roll and all the rest of it. What should happen is that if Mark Scott wants the ABC to be a public broadcaster, let it be funded by the public, by donations. It does not, this day and age, taxpayer money should not be paid to a company that ends up being a competitor to commercial companies that are doing it tough.
Well, correct. Absolutely right.
So, is that the end of it? Certainly not. The ABC board needs 2 new members. It also needs to find a new managing director to replace Mark Scott, whose contract expires next July. And as that search goes on, it will face pressure about ABC bias, the ABC's budget, and even the future of taxpayer-funded public broadcasting. Q&A is on next, and 2 of its panellists have pulled out because of the row. It seems the culture war is on again. And you can read more about the ABC's battle with its critics on our Facebook page or on our website, where you can also get a transcript and download the programme. You can also catch up with us on iView and contact me or Media Watch on Twitter. But for now, until next week, that's all from us. Goodbye.